Hello there, Bunneh. Bunneh here, and I challenged myself to survive for 50 days on Sons of the Force hardest difficulty. Food and water are much harder to come by, temperature plays a larger role in survival, and enemies hit insanely hard. In addition to these difficulties, I've also tasked myself with acquiring every single item in the game, just to spice things up. So join me as I survive the cruelties of the wild, discover hidden secrets, explore new technologies, and try to entertain myself by whatever means possible before ultimately facing off against the toughest challenge the game has to offer. If you haven't seen the first 3 episodes of this series, then I would highly recommend checking them out first before you watch this one. There's a link to the playlist in the description down below. Day 31 begins, and it's winter. It's okay, I've been preparing for this. Bunnehs were made for the snow. Unfortunately, this means that our fish traps no longer work, but that's what our man-baby servant is for. Now I'm going to warn you in advance, I was a bit scatterbrained this day and ended up doing a variety of different things with no particular goals in mind, so buckle up. My inventory was getting a bit out of hand with capped resources, so I decided to make a new shelving unit inside of the base to store some things. Crafting things like time bombs helped to consolidate some of the resources as well, and I was surely going to use them at some point in time, so it just kinda made sense. I raid the camp for some breakfast cereal and ride the zip lines down towards the bunker for the daily craft of tech mesh and arrows. I had a huge desire to tackle the entertainment bunker, but I felt that I should probably wait a little bit longer. I really wanted to connect the entire electric fence around the main base together, but placing these sticks was harder than it looks. I just couldn't find the right spot to make it all flow together, so I just gave up. If you recall from last episode, I had just acquired the compound bow and didn't really have much of a chance to use it yet. The draw and power of this bow was much different than the crafted bow I was using, so I decided to fire off some practice shots at this paper target. I was pretty damn inaccurate at first, but after some practice I got the hang of things. Kelvin's man-baby efforts had yielded us quite a bit of stone in the background, and rather than letting it go to waste, I decided to use it to start framing out another wall on this side of the base. I didn't really have the desire to make this wall at this point in time, but I at least wanted to get it lined up and started. I ordered Kelvin to gather some more stone in the background, but he just straight up says no and walks repeatedly into the electric fence. I realized that I had enough resources on me to craft the remaining pieces of tech armor that I needed to complete the set. I slap it all on the armor stand, and my god, it looks fucking sexy. I practice a little bit more archery, but this time around I use stone arrows because they fly a lot different than the 3D printed ones or the carbon ones do. They were also a lot cheaper and easier to make, so I figured I'd probably be using them more than the other arrows. Next, I decided to throw a pot in the fire and see what cooked foods I hadn't crafted yet. While these technically weren't on the list of items that I had to acquire, I still felt that I should try my best to make all of the unique dishes that I can. As you can see here, there's 2 main ingredients that I had yet to find, one of which was a mushroom, and the other one being the dreaded turtle eggs. But that's a problem for a later time, because right now I can craft the Kelvin Special and check it off the non-checklist, if that makes sense. While flipping through the survival handbook, I come across something called a spring trap that uses a turtle shell, and I thought, hey, I have a turtle shell, so I crafted it. It turns out that this thing is basically a fucking trampoline that can be reset after every use. While its primary function is to help defend the base, I had a different use in mind. I mean, who needs a man door when you can just Bunneh hop your way over walls? Now sure, it was a little bit dangerous at times because it can launch you really high, but once you figure out the physics of it, it's actually quite fun and safe to use. I pull our Kelvin Special from the fire to store it on the shelves, and do my best to empty out the rest of my inventory before sleeping the night off. Day 32 begins with biting the head off of a fish and eating cat food. What have I become? Now that wintertime was here, I wanted to show you guys how the printed sled works. I tried coupling its abilities with the spring trap, but it was pretty disappointing. Without using the spring trap, though, holy shit does this thing move! Oh my god! While we're down here, we might as well loot the bunker, and oh shit, it's adventure time! I take a moment to cycle through my key bindings and get my head straight. I knew this place was dangerous and wanted to make sure I approached these upcoming fights pretty cautiously. This bunker is honestly one of my favorites in the game, just because it's so unique looking to the rest of the areas. The first part is this sweet little gym area, which, if you guys didn't know, is the prime stalking grounds of a Bunneh. Right around the corner is a bunch of enemies that I try to take out stealthily using the crossbow. I even try throwing some stones to make noise and lure the creepy things away from me, but it turns out that this game is not The Last of Us. At some point I get tired of the stealth and just go full shotgun on a few of them, which is crazy effective, but kind of wasteful. Sitting on one of the workbenches is a tracksuit, which is another unique outfit that we can give to Virginia. As I'm exploring the area, this fingermouth thing comes out of freaking nowhere and scares the shit out of me. I felt bad wasting that shotgun shell, but I was genuinely caught off guard. Attached to this gym area is a small room with a pole. It's cool set dressing, but there's otherwise nothing of interest in here. The spa area, on the other hand, is a completely different story. There's cloth scattered all over the place, but more importantly, there's a goddamn pair of pajamas on the shelf. Pajamas are the comfiest clothing in the game, meaning that we can get a higher quality of sleep while wearing them and resting at night. Plus, they look fucking adorable. I take a few minutes to thoroughly explore the whole spa area before lighting up a Molotov and waging war on this creepy thing. The compound bow puts in some work and we basically just pincushion this thing to death. This area above us is pretty cool. It's like a bar/pool area. It would probably be a pretty sweet hangout if it wasn't for all of the blood and dead bodies. Just ahead is a bar and a music room that I know for a fact has a guitar that we have to check off the list. I never acquired this item before because for some reason it never spawned for me, which seems to be the case once again. My one buddy did find it though, so I know for a fact it's here, I just don't know where. In this back lounge area, I find a whole bunch of dead people, but more importantly a keycard that I need to progress. There's also a story item that's probably important, but who cares? There's some basic resources and another story item inside of this room, but the only thing that's really important in here is this GPS location to Maintenance Bunker B.
Give me your guitar!
No, seriously, I want the guitar. I mean, what the hell does a Bunneh have to do around here to get one? I decided to tab out and look it up, and as it turns out, it's a known bug and can be fixed by saving your progress and then restarting the game. I fully planned on doing this, but not just yet. This hallway is full of all kinds of badness, but luckily they're blind as hell and I never miss.
Okay. Do it!
The next room is a small movie theater with a fingermouth thing roaming around, which I absolutely just pump full of arrows. Wedged in this poor dude's abdomen is the chainsaw, which is technically the best wood-cutting tool in the game, but as we'll find out later, the axe is still sometimes preferable. This bunker begins to slowly transition into a more normal-looking cave from this point forwards. There's some mutant babies along the way, but it's otherwise pretty unremarkable. I reach the end of the cave and crawl my way through the crevice back outside, but hang on a minute! I never got my fucking guitar! Unfortunately for me, this area that I jumped down can't be climbed back up into, and zip lines don't seem to work. I know because I tried. What this means is I have to completely run the whole way back through the entrance of the bunker, through the gym area, past the spa, into the bar area above, all to get to where the guitar is supposed to spawn. It still didn't spawn yet, which means I have to now save my game and restart the client. Gloriously, this ends up working, and we walk back into the bar to find the guitar sitting on the counter. The guitar was mostly a fluff item that you could use to play solo renditions of some of the game's music, but it also doubles as a melee weapon in a pinch. I would be lying if I said I didn't play the hell out of this thing during my playtime in the game, especially when I got bored later in the series. On my way back to base, I loot this camp for all that it's worth, hit my turtle shell trampoline to pole vault my way over the wall in style, and get some good night's rest on my stick bed. Day 33 begins with making a crafting club. I by no means needed this melee weapon, but it was an item on the list that I had to check off. Today's priority was completing more of the stone wall on this side of the main base. Kelvin had gathered quite a bit of stone while we were away, and I wanted to use it all up so that we had more storage space. Before that, though, I decided to open up his inventory to look at all the outfits that we had available for him. It looks like he can wear pretty much anything that we can, including the blazer, but the tuxedo is the obvious winner. Anyways, back to work on the base. This stone wall that I was attempting to build was pretty much doomed from the start because the terrain over here is way too variable. Because of this, I kind of shifted gears a bit. I decided to clean up the courtyard area a little bit because there was just too much shit in the way of the new structure that I wanted to build. This meant that I had to consolidate all of our various storage bins around this little rock and pick up and move the items on this shelving unit. After this, I used some logs to space the new structure where I wanted it to be, and then started framing it in with stone. Basically, I wanted to build a very defensible 2x2 shack that I could stand on top of and lure attackers towards. Their AI definitely seemed to be attracted towards doors, so I figured if I covered this thing in them, they would probably attract the mobs in and they would die in the process. I did have to move all of our stone storage bins to make room for this thing, but it cleaned up the base anyways, so it was all good. I pulled the trigger on completely scrapping this stone wall on this side of the base for the reasons I mentioned before, but the stone was going to be repurposed for this new structure anyways, so don't worry. While trying to move my log sled through this section of the camp, this happened. Now, I'm not entirely sure what happened here, but my best guess is that there was a campfire that I ran over, and as a failsafe in the game, the log sled just self-imploded.
What the
I don't know, but now I gotta make another one. This does give me the awesome excuse to use the new chainsaw, and as you can see, this thing just rips through trees. It does use batteries though, so I don't want to overuse it too much. I used the new electric guitar in the most sensible fashion, and decided to give Virginia her new tracksuit. It looks pretty good, so we might just stick with it for a bit. Log sleds take a lot of sticks, and cannibals keep attacking me, but all in all, it doesn't take too long to recraft this thing. I try using the red cannibal mask to scare this guy away, but he kind of just stares at me, slowly walks up, and smacks me in the face. So I don't know what the hell good this thing is for.
Gotcha, bitch!
I've returned to base with the full log sled and laid down the floor planks for the new structure. I just used wood for all the walls of this thing too, because it was going to be nothing but doors the whole way around. I did have to make multiple trips for more logs, but I'll spare you guys most of the grind here by speeding things up. I worked all the way until nightfall, getting as much done as I could before packing it in and calling it a night. Day 34 begins pretty much right where I left off. It was time to add all of the doors to the structure, but just like Virginia, I always needed more wood. Some of this wood went to repairing the palisade wall that seems to be perpetually damaged at all points in time, but it is what it is. The rest of the wood goes to finishing off all of the doorways and the ceiling. I decided to dismantle the rain catcher in order to repurpose that turtle shell into another trampoline. I figured this was probably the best way to get on top of this thing during attacks, because the enemies couldn't follow me up once it was triggered. Next, I cut a small hole in the ceiling for an access panel inside, dropped a rope down below, and locked every door with a stick. I do end up getting attacked by some cannibals here, but arrows to the head and Virginia's Gatling gun arms take them down pretty quickly. The structure was ready for some spikes at this point, so I got to work on placing down sticks in an orderly fashion. For some reason, the spikes seem to place down just fine, but as you've seen with the electric fences, they're a completely different story. I brace all of the sticks with rocks for added support, and try my hand at once again trying to build an electric fence. Don't worry though, this time it actually kinda works out, albeit with a little bit of jank. I get most of the framework done before nightfall sets in, and I have to stop. I guzzle about 6 gallons of water before bed, as every dietitian recommends, and fall fast asleep on my pile of sticks. Day 35 begins, and I tinker with this fence just a little bit longer before calling it quits. Most of the fence worked out just fine, except this one corner that was being stubborn. I was pretty confident that the fence was actually going to work out this time, and I had other plans in mind for today aside from more base building. I rode the zip lines down to complete the daily looting of the bunker before setting out on the next grand adventure. Anyways, I'm headed to the residential bunker. It's a bit of a trek from home, being on the other side of the map and all, but it contains some pretty awesome items that I knew were going to come in handy. Now, rather than navigate around this giant-ass winter mountain like a sensible person, I decided to simply billy goat my way up the thing. I figured this was probably faster than trying to navigate around the mountain, plus I knew for a fact there was a hang glider up there, and I wanted it. Now, getting down the other side of the mountain was a bit touch and go at times, but ultimately I figured it out. Just on the other side of this frozen lake was a little camp that has a hang glider spawn, which is the final vehicle that I had to check off the list. Not only was this a milestone for the series, but also an incredibly useful tool that paid off almost immediately. Just on the other side of this river is a little ice cave, which seems to only have a few basic resources inside, but it's pretty sweet nonetheless. I climb out to the tip of this mountain peak and take flight for the first time in the playthrough. Hang gliders are certainly the fastest vehicles in the game, but require a little bit of height to take full advantage of. They're fairly safe too, despite seeming absolutely terrifying to land. On the flight over this frozen lake, I spot yet another moose that I definitely should have killed for the moose trophy, but didn't. Like I said, landing is actually pretty safe despite seeming terrifying, as when you impact the ground you sort of just drop like a sack of potatoes and don't take any fall damage. The cave entrance wasn't too far from this lake, and I crawl inside to begin the terrifying descent into the residential bunker. I use a key card to get in, and the first thing I see is this dead guy plastered against the wall. Not a good sign. Neither is this cutscene that plays out.
Get down, son!
Now I'm sure that sweet action scene meant something to someone, but I have no clue what's going on. What I do know is that up ahead is a ton of little apartments full of sweet, succulent loot. Oh yeah, and terrifying mutated creatures, but that's just to be expected.
That's a lot of damage.
Gotcha, bitch!
In this first apartment, I find some story items, some 9mm ammo, another flashlight attachment, and another pistol spawn. But we've already got this from making that second swim out to the raft. The next apartment, I get swarmed by mutated babies, but I've got shit to do! There's a couple more story items inside of here, and I use the printer to craft up some more tech mesh and arrows. Buried inside of this dude's face is the putter, which is another unique item crossed off the list. It's a melee weapon that can be used to putt around golf balls, which is pretty sweet. I finished the first level of rooms and was ready to move on at this point, but this next section was infested with enemies. I decide to open up with a Molotov and pull out the shotgun to deal with the impending waves. As much as I hated to waste ammunition, I felt it was pretty necessary in this situation. Plus, I found some more ammo afterwards, so it was alright. This next apartment has a god tier item that I was incredibly stoked to find. The katana. This was basically the best in slot melee weapon in the game, and would make fights a lot easier. Over on this shelving unit is a leather suit that I can give to Virginia to get laid. I tried putting it on myself because I thought it would complement my hourglass figure, but the game wouldn't let me for some reason. Sitting on the desk is the spacesuit, which is a pretty sick outfit for either us or Kelvin. Up ahead, I find a control room with loads of computing monitors. Computing things. I decide to press a button because it looks shiny, and apparently I help this guy out in doing so. This doorway here actually has a pretty sweet aesthetic attached to it. When you get really close to the glass, you can see that the room is full of skeletons, but they're otherwise unnoticeable from a distance. Little attentions to details like this make a game so much more enjoyable. Up ahead is a morgue area with a book sitting on one of the tables, and a gold mask on this dead guy. I still don't understand what this item does, and I chalked it up as being pretty much worthless just like the red mask, but it is an item off the list, so I'll take it. I swipe a key card into the next area, and quickly progress my way through this dark cave into the chill night air. I attempt to make a camp and sleep the night off, but the game had other plans for me. I get attacked by a small group of cannibals that keeps me from going to sleep, but at least I get to try out the new katana, so that's kinda cool. These guys went down pretty easily, but the horde of creepy mutated creatures that followed was a completely different story. It's pitch black, and there's at least a half dozen of these things coming at me, one of which has been juicing up on something because she's blue. I use a combination of fire attacks with my torch and shotgun slugs to the face to whittle my way through their numbers, but I would be lying if I said it wasn't a tough fight. After countless shotgun shells, I finally down the last of them and return to the tent to sleep. But the game wouldn't let me, because there's a stupid golem creature running around, so I have to kill it, and I try to sleep. But the game wouldn't let me, because there's a cannibal, so I kill it, and I try to go to sleep. But my guy only sleeps for half the night because there's another cannibal running around, and at this point, fuck it, I'm up! Day 36 begins, and it's spring! Man, how long was I trying to fall asleep for? Before we leave this area, there was another crazy important cave just on the other side of this lake called the Cultist Cave. I figured that rather than have to make this journey again in the future, I might as well just do it now. Also, this area that I'm in right now is absolutely beautiful, and I wish I was here instead of sitting in this computer chair. I swim my way across the lake, chow down on a bunch of random food items, and slice my way into the cave entrance. This cave was full of resources, but more importantly it housed two items in particular that were super vital to completing the game. Not far in, we experience our first group of enemies dashing around in the darkness and spinning around uncontrollably. I used the katana to take out most of them, but after losing a good bit of armor, I decided a few shotgun shells might be necessary. This cave was pretty unique looking, but basically plays out like a maze. It's absolutely massive and has dozens of tunnels leading off into different directions, some of which being underwater, so it's really easy to get turned around. On top of that, it's full of dangerous, creepy enemies, so it's keeping me on my toes. Up ahead, I find this small room illuminated with candles and overhead torches. Lying on this shoulder's lap is one of the items that I came here for, the rifle. I didn't get to use this too much during my last playthrough, and I wanted to give it more of a shot this time around. No pun intended. I stick with the tried and true method of stunning and slashing these fingermouth creatures, and as you can see, the katana is far more effective than the firefighter axe. I climb this rope upwards into a higher section of the cave, and start to see golden tunnels and hallways meandering about. While these were sometimes helpful in identifying where I was, other times they were just as confusing as the cave walls. I stealthily take out a few enemies with the crossbow and find this giant slip and slide that plummets me further into the caverns. These things just don't seem very comfortable to slide down. More golden structures inlaid the walls and supported the overhead ceiling here, which tells me I'm making progress? Maybe? I can tell there's a lot of enemies in this next chamber, so I justify tossing a hand grenade to lighten the load. Somehow I completely missed this stun gun shot, so I decide to break out the pistol and just fucking Swiss cheese this thing.
My God, it's coming right for us!
There's dead cultists lying all over the place with batteries and ammunition. I'm not exactly sure what kind of cult these guys were in, but I'm pretty sure they were sponsored by Energizer and Bushnell. I climb my way down another rope, completely miss another stun gun shot, recoup like a badass, loot some basic loot in a side cavern, shovel some food into my face, and dive into this ominous-looking watering hole. As soon as I swim out of this thing and my feet touch the cavern floor, a group of demons charges right at me. I successfully use the cross for the first time in the series, and it works like a fucking charm. It basically lights them on fire, but apparently does a ton of damage in the process too, because it only takes a couple rounds to fully kill them. The only problem with it is, it doesn't seem to work very well against multiple targets at once, so most of the time fighting I spend dodging attacks while targeting a single demon at a time. Up ahead I start finding space suits. I'm guessing this makes sense in the lore of the game, but I'm really confused. Aloofness aside though, I find another one of those items that I came here for, the golden armor. This stuff provides a 70% damage reduction against demons, but you take that other 30% damage as health damage, making it a bit risky to use. Also, it has no effect against other creatures in the game, so I never found it all that helpful. The real reason for acquiring it though was to access another area in the game, which we'll get to later. Now, as I've said before, this cave is massive and quite confusing. Just when I think I've explored everything, I find new monsters lurking in the darkness, telling me that I haven't been there yet. I knew there was one more item hidden somewhere in here, but I couldn't recall where I'd found it in my last playthrough. Finally, after killing dozens of enemies and exploring endless cave tunnels, I find a dead cultist lying against the wall with the night vision goggles. These things were incredible to have in the dark caves and forests, but the only downside to them is you can't really use your torch, flares, or flashlights because you'll burn out your retinas. I keep these things on for most of the long journey out of this cave because they're really helpful in seeing the details of the cave from far away. In fact, I wish I had found these first because they would have helped a lot with navigating this cave and finding the other items, but I digress. I work my way back to the area where the golden armor was because there's a series of ropes here that can be climbed to escape. This climb alone takes me a couple of minutes to complete, which just goes to show how deep we traveled in this cave. I'd love to say I was completely done now, but there's more underwater segments and dozens of enemies to fight, all leading up to another goddamn slip and slide that had me questioning if I made the wrong turn. Luckily, I didn't, and I crawl my way through the cave exit into the open world. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself right now, wait, it's light outside. But Bunneh, you entered the cave when it was light outside. Yes, that's because it's been an entire fucking day. It took me over an hour to complete that cave, and we're now into the next day cycle. I set up camp just for the sake of saving my progress, and... Day 37 has already started. We talked about this, remember? That cave took forever to complete, and we're now running on 0 hours of sleep, so that's great. I take a few minutes to get my food and water situation sorted out, and it turns out that Virginia followed me all the way here to bring me breakfast. Now that is dedication. While she's sitting in the river trying to cool off from the pure sex vibes that I radiate, I decide to gift her the new outfit. This thing looks sexy as hell, and strongly reminds me of the Mord Sith outfits from the Legend of the Seeker television show and book series. Just when I think Virginia is a complete badass for wearing that outfit and firing a shotgun, she manages to set herself on fire before running a short distance and tripping on a rock. You know, you're lucky you're hot, Virginia. Oh god, never mind.
Jesus Christ.
On the way back to base, I come across the airstrip again, which seems to always be inhabited by cannibals and deer that just lay there while you shoot them. At one point, one of the female cannibals begins to slowly approach me, and I think that, oh, maybe she wants to call a peace between our people. And then she screams and scratches me in the face, so there goes that idea. So at this point, you may have figured out that I no longer possess a hang glider. That's because I left it at the first cave that we completed, did an entirely new, larger cave afterwards, and exited at a completely different location than where I started. That hang glider is gone. Just forget about it. We'll find another. Luckily, I did have this Night 5 to get around a little faster, so I wasn't completely gimped. There were quite a few dangerous campsites on the way back to base, but I opted to simply ignore them. I had enough excitement for the past few days, and I just wanted to chill. Back at base, I shovel a bunch of food into my face, and use up some of the wire that we looted to work on this electric fence. I didn't have enough to complete it, so I decided to tear off some of the wire from the fence around our main base. This fence is basically worthless given the gaps and inconsistencies, so I figured this was just a smart move. Before I could fully wire up the new fence though, I had to tinker around with the placement of sticks for a bit to get a consistent and seamless run. This time around, I wanted to be able to power the entire thing with a single solar panel. After a long while of tinkering around and finding the best possible connection, I fucking did it, and it works! Oh my god, it's been a long time coming. I still had some daylight left to work with, so I decided to build a small platform beside the structure that I could place my new spring trap on top of. I didn't want to have to look around for this thing in the grass or the snow while it was being attacked, so I figured this was the smartest play. Like most of the building in this game though, I changed the design multiple times before I was finally pleased with the outcome, but it all worked out in the end. I needed to eat and drink before going to sleep, as otherwise I would take damage when I first wake up in the morning. While my food was cooking up, I decided to do some research. Just like with the cooking pot recipes, I wanted to try my absolute best to craft as many of the consumable items as I could, even though they technically weren't on the list. I started by crafting the health mix using yarrow and aloe vera. This was essentially a natural health potion that you could use in place of meds. Next, I crafted an energy mix using chicory and arrow leaf, which I believe restores stamina levels, but I'm not entirely sure. In all of my inventory management, I realized that I didn't have any fireweed yet, but I did have some seeds. So, Kelvin? You okay, buddy? Okay. Anyways, I decided to craft a standing planter alongside the outside of the wall. This would allow me to grow some fireweed in the off chance that I never actually find any in the open world. With that small victory, I call it a day and sleep the night off. Day 38 begins a little more normal than some of the recent ones. I ride the zip lines down to loot the bunker and craft up as much tech armor as I can get my little Bunneh paws on. At this point, I could probably stop looting this bunker given how much tech armor I had, but it's still helpful for batteries, wire, and light bulbs. Heading towards the zipline tower, I find some aloe vera growing on the ground. Finding this growing here sparks further incentive to check the fireweed I planted, and much to my surprise, it's already starting to grow. Now, there were still quite a few items on that list that I just never got around to crafting, so I figured now was the time to do it. I started by making some hide armor using leather and cloth. Next, I made some leaf armor using leaves and cloth. After this, I once again decided to explore the cooking recipes in the game to see what I had to work on. Mushrooms and the dreaded turtle eggs were top priority, because everything else I either had or could acquire pretty easily. As I'm walking out of my base, a cannibal decides to walk straight in, which scares the living hell out of me, but I can use our new defensive tower. Unfortunately, these guys are idiots and just keep hitting my walls instead of pursuing me, so I don't get to try it out too much. I spend a minute repairing everything up, and decide to head out into the forest foraging for plants and herbs. I wanted to try to find the mushrooms that I needed, plus I wanted to find some fireweed growing naturally, just in case the stuff that I planted wasn't going to grow in time. As it turns out, fireweed only spawns at very specific locations on the map, which explains why I never found any. I didn't know this when I set out to find it though, so bear with me. As I was out and about foraging for plants in the forest, I was also slowly working my way towards the beach to look for turtle eggs. But then I came across a mistake that I made. Apparently, turtle eggs can only be found in the early springtime, and it had already been a couple days since spring started, so my time frame was already really limited or completely over before I even started. I desperately searched the shores for any resemblance of turtle eggs, and although a few rocks and oysters scattered around got my hopes up temporarily, these were not the eggs I was looking for. I took my anger out on a seagull, and even managed to fuck that up, so things weren't really going my way right now. Regardless, the mission remains unchanged. Finding the turtle eggs wasn't going to make or break the series because the food items were optional, but it was still really disappointing that I might not be able to ever acquire these things before the 50 days were up. I stuck to the plan of foraging in the forest trying to find the items that I could acquire, and while I did find a lot of plants and herbs, I didn't find any of the ones I was missing. I spent a good 20 minutes running around searching everywhere before nightfall enveloped the landscape and made it too dark to see anything. I returned to base and hung my head in shame. Day 39 begins with me longingly staring at different food recipes to see what I can make. I start adding the ingredients in one by one, and oh god damn it, Kelvin, seriously? Why did I give you nice clothes? After he decides to meander off, we complete the recipe and decide to take a sip, just to make sure it come out alright. While I still needed the fireweed, the one type of mushroom, and turtle eggs, I was feeling pretty defeated from not finding any of these things the day before. I decided to shift gears and set course for Maintenance Bunker C, which housed an item that I thought might come in handy in some of these fights. Unfortunately, this meant that I had to climb this ridiculous snow mountain again, but I'm like part billy goat, part acrobat at this point, so nothing can stop me. Shit! Oh, motherfucker. Holy shit! I wasn't sure how to get down this giant-ass mountain again because I was kind of banking on picking up that hang glider, but it didn't respawn on the ice mountain for some reason, so I just pinched my butt cheeks together and relied on pure agility. Maintenance Bunker C was located here on the golf course, buried underground like the other bunkers. Like usual, it took me quite a few minutes to excavate the area and reveal the hatch frame, but it's actually quite enjoyable to do this since it's so far and few between. I never found Maintenance Bunker C in my last playthrough, so I wasn't sure what to expect climbing inside. I approached the first room with my shotgun drawn, but I don't see any baddies. I approached this dead construction worker lying on the ground and discovered the item that I came here for, the revolver. Like I said, I never found this bunker before, so in turn I never found this firearm, and I was pretty stoked to try it out. It doesn't seem like you can put any attachments on it, but that's alright. The rest of this bunker is actually pretty unremarkable, albeit creepy. I climb out of here into the cold rainfall and pray that it doesn't hinder my journey home. Shit! Oh, motherfuck! I spend a few minutes once again scouring this golf course for a hang glider, but can't seem to find one anywhere. It's a damn shame, too, because it would have made the journey back home much faster. I slowly creep my way down this cliffside and loot the crashed ships down below before continuing further down the beach with my usual gracefulness. Okay, fine, I'll put on the night vision goggles. Jeez. I guess this is better, like, a lot. I was still pretty far from base, and despite having the night vision goggles, it was getting too hard to see, so I decided to take refuge inside of this bunker. I'm not sure where my character learned to climb a ladder like this, but it's what I'm working with. I had to take out all of the mutant babies that respawned in the back room, but after that, I was able to crash on the bed for the night. Day 40 begins with trying to make some 3D printed arrows and trying to sort out breakfast. Now, I know from past experience not to try to start a fire underneath of the sprinklers, so I decide to put it over here in the corner right next to the barrels of flammable liquid. I groove out to the music while my arrows craft up and breakfast cooks, but I may have gone a bit too far with the headbanging. Climbing out of this bunker, I get swarmed by those little golem creatures, but
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I swing by the beach on my way back to base looking for more turtle eggs because I was still in denial about missing my opportunity, but alas, there were none. This little Bunneh was defeated. Or was I? I make it back to main base, shovel some cereal inside of my face, craft up a bunch of bone armor, ride the zip lines down to the bunker, loot said bunker, craft a bunch of tech mesh, and have an absolute heart attack when the zipline fails and I fall off the tower. But slippery feet aside, I was bound and determined to make more progress on the plant front. I set out into the forest foraging for plants once more, but this time I decided to actually tab out and look up where fireweed plants are. That's when I came across the information that I already shared with you guys earlier, so present Bunneh that you're watching is now up to speed. The mushrooms, on the other hand, didn't seem to have any kind of particular spawn, so I figured I should just look for those first before setting course for the fireweed. I spent a long time running around looking for these things, and just couldn't seem to locate them anywhere. I speculated that maybe they were a seasonal thing, kind of like the turtle eggs, and I feared that I may have missed my chance to find them. At the time of recording this, the wiki page was pretty scarce and didn't provide any information on them, so I was just spitballing at this point. But after a long day of searching the forests, I come up completely dry and had to head back to base. My food and water was getting really low, and I knew that nightfall was approaching pretty quick. Since I wasn't being attacked and I only had a little bit of daylight left to work with, I decided to tinker a bit more with some of the items we found, starting with the rifle. I'm not even sure I fired a single rifle bullet in my last playthrough, and was actually looking forward to trying this thing out. As I was goofing around with the rifle and pulling up the scope, Kelvin walks up on the hillside above our base, and his posture and outfit reminded me so much of a James Bond intro. I pull out the binoculars too, just to tinker around a little bit, and spot Virginia kindly bringing me some dinner. I know what you're doing, Virginia, and it's not gonna work. Oh my god. As the sun was setting down on my humble base, I pulled out the guitar to play a few tunes. There's actually a decent number of songs that your character will cycle through, which keeps it pretty entertaining to mess around with. As someone who plays the guitar in real life, I can attest that his hand placement is nowhere near where it should be while playing, but the game devs gave it more of a shot than most studios would, so props to them. I played music until it was so dark outside I couldn't see anymore, and laid my head down for the night preparing for the next set of adventures. And that is going to be the stopping point for this episode in the series. I really hope you guys are still enjoying watching them as much as I'm enjoying editing them. It's been a massive undertaking so far, but hopefully it'll all be worth it in the end. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, then please be sure to leave this video a like down below, subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you can stay up to date on all of my latest content, join the Discord for a community of like-minded woodland creatures, and please keep leaving me comments because they warm my little Bunneh heart. A very special thank you goes out to all of the Bunnehs who support me on Patreon. You guys are amazing, and if you would like to support me and the content that I create, you can now do so for as little as $1 a month. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.